That's recording.
So I've just pressed a few more buttons here. Okay. Right, well, welcome everybody. I'm sorry about this. I mean, I have meetings on Zoom. I had one earlier today. And Teams I've used as well with various people. I haven't used Starleaf before, but I think the signal is probably down to where I live. And so if you can hear me, that's good. I can't see you at the moment. You might be able to see me shortly. I don't really know. So if you've all got a copy of the agenda in front of you, we've had the advice about the recording, so we all know that. Do we have any apologies for absence?
There was one from, bear with me. I think it was Councillor Fussell who was trying to rearrange a clash with a work appointment, who said he may or may not join, and if not, to pass on his apologies. Just for your information, Chair, as you can't see on the screen, the following members are present. So we have got Dr. Kirby, Mr. Barnes, Mr. Alexander, Avon Roberts, who's one of the Fire Authority members, and Joel Williams, who's a Fire Authority member, and Sarah's also on screen, Deputy Monitoring Officer, and Julie is at our headquarters site and she'll be doing the minutes.
Okay, who did you say had a clash?
I think it was Councillor Fussell. I'm just very quickly trying to find the email.
Mr. Fussell is independent?
Yes.
So did I hear you mention Councillor Harris?
Councillor Harris is not here and I've not received any apologies, so unless Julie has.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just turning that off now. Right.
You might want to try using the chat as messages coming in.
Well, if somebody needs to ask a question during the meeting, I'm quite happy for them to indicate, and then Sally or somebody can draw my attention to the question, and we'll deal with it as it crops up. Is that okay? Will that work?
Yeah, that's fine. I've just been advised by Councillor Williams that he has to attend a meeting at 4:45.
Oh, okay. He's not going to be with us long then. Okay.
And he's just raised a query about members of the authority being aware of the IPRW report, which has already gone to our fire authority at their Christmas meeting,
right?
And the ombudsman reports, so we can pick that up.
Okay. Well, welcome to you all. It is the first opportunity I've had to wish you all a Happy New Year. We don't meet very often, as you know, in fact, about annually, because we generally don't have any complaints. We haven't, and I'm always reluctant to say it because they'll flood in after I say it, but we haven't had any complaints in the last 12 months for us to deal with. But we have the agenda. The next item on the agenda is a declaration of interest. Now, what I was going to ask Sally is, it does say that we have to declare orally and in writing. And I'm just wondering how practically we're going to do the and in writing bit.
Yeah, that will cover your declarations of interest that you make when you're appointed into role. So obviously, if you've got any new interests that have arisen relevant for the agenda, you do need to make me aware. That can be just by an email after the meeting. Okay. But if you let me know orally now, if there are any interests.
Anybody showing any interest in that?
I think Councillor Alexander's talking, but you're on mute, Councillor Alexander. Not Councillor, sorry. Force of habit.
Just Ronnie Alexander is fine. Thank you, Sally. I was going to say, can I just be clear, please? In relation to declarations of interest, do we only need to declare interests which are relevant to the agenda and to the brief of the FRS, as opposed to a general declaration of interests?
Yes, it's interests that are relevant to the agenda we've got before us today.
It does specifically say in that paragraph, doesn't it, in respect of matters contained in this agenda.
Yeah.
So I think we're okay there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, moving on then, to receive the minutes of the last meeting, which was on the 3rd of February. That was before lockdown, wasn't it? Gosh, we were all there. Any factual inaccuracies on page 1 that anybody wants to point out? No. On page 2, I don't have any factual inaccuracies. Does anybody? There are 1 or 2 issues which I want to raise, but any factual inaccuracies?
No, no one's indicating.
Okay. Well, if we go to 85.1.2, officers agreed to ensure that all members of the Fire and Rescue Authority were in receipt of a copy. I got a sneaky feeling that happened, but did everybody get a copy? Did anybody not get a copy then?
I've got confirmation from our member services section that they did send that out.
Okay. Does anybody present there think that they didn't get a copy? No?
No.
Okay. Move on. 85.1.3. Officers agreed to confirm that the following clause was written into the document. And that was about appeals, wasn't it? Because if I remember correctly, there didn't seem to be much of a mention about how to appeal to the Ombudsman's office, and we suggested that. Can the officers agree that that has gone in, or that they dealt with that?
Yes, that has, but obviously the Ombudsman office has its own discretion as to whether to accept something outside those time periods.
Sure, but we did what we thought they should do.
Yeah.
Fine, thank you very much. 85.14, the last paragraph of the the last sentence rather, of the second paragraph, officers agreed to feedback members' concerns, and that was about not progressing with the network, which had been suggested. Did you feed that back?
Yes, that's been fed back, and it probably picks up on a couple of other areas under the agenda because it also links in with training and development.
Right.
So this issue was discussed at the monitoring officer meeting. Obviously, the monitoring officer standards committee conference for 2020 was postponed because of COVID, but there's now plans to reintroduce that for October, as you'll be aware from the agenda. So hopefully we'll start to pick up some of those items through there. And I think, the fact that it's now more feasible to do a lot of these things virtually, we can then start to take a fresh look at some of these aspects.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alexander had attended a meeting as observer and gave us feedback. That was very helpful. Thank you for that. Any factual inaccuracies on page 3? It says page 3, but at the top of the page it says 5. Page 3, I think. Any factual inaccuracies? No. 86.2, Mr. Alexander agreed to forward his observations to members and officers. Mr. Alexander, did you manage to get around to doing that?
I did actually raise a query with the Vale about their monitoring feedback form. I'm not sure I had a response to it, but I'll pick that issue up again.
Would you like the officers to chase that for you?
No, that's fine. I'm entirely happy to do it from my perspective. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. 87.2. There was a query about the annual report.
Yeah,
officers agreed to confirm if it applied to the Fire and Rescue Authority Standards Committee meetings.
Yes, there's no requirement for this committee to do an annual report.
Well, that's good. I think our report would be quite brief anyway, wouldn't it?
It would.
Okay, thank you. So turning over again, I'm on page 4, although it says 6 at the top. Any factual inaccuracies on that page from anyone? No? Okay, if we look at 90.3 at the bottom of the page, we'd had a discussion. We highlighted the benefits of attending external training courses. The officers agreed to consider this option and to provide further information in due course. I guess with lockdown, maybe not a lot has happened there. Sally?
No, you're correct there. Obviously, we're looking towards the Standards Conference now, which is going to be held virtually October of this year, and certainly we can look if some of the areas that you've highlighted aren't covered, we can look at our officers delivering some training to you. So, for example, equality and diversity training, we've got specialists within the organisation who can provide that. I suspect social media training generally is included within the Standards Conference agenda as one of the workshops. I know the WLGA frequently do something on use of social media and roles and what should and shouldn't happen on there.
Okay. You mentioned the conference in October. Do you have a date for that, an exact date?
Not an exact date, no. I think it's covered in agenda item 11, okay. But we are looking for that October date at the current time.
Right. What happened last October? I don't remember seeing anything. Did they have one last October? No,
it's a conference that takes place every other year.
Right. I should have known that. Okay, thank you. Turning over. Sorry,
Chair. I think Councillor Ronnie Alexander's trying to come in.
Okay.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I just wanted to mention again that I think training is absolutely fundamental to the way that the committee works, and I realise that it may not have been very practical to organise that during lockdown because, frankly, people's priorities were elsewhere. I will offer the observation, though, that some standards committees continue to run training, but in a virtual medium.
Yeah.
And I think I'm very seized of the fact that I wouldn't wish the opportunities for training to be lost as we gradually move out of lockdown and hopefully things return to normal. But of course, that still doesn't deny that there may be opportunities to do training in a virtual sense, and that achieves economies of scale. So I'm very keen that the impetus for training is not lost.
I don't think I could agree more with you on that. I know there are other priorities, but there is training going on, whether it's with standards committees or, well, look at schools. Schools are doing training online, aren't they? And there is a lot of training going on. Can I ask, Sally, is there virtual training going on for the fire and rescue staff virtually, or has all training ceased?
No, we have been focusing obviously on our operational training, and that is still delivered face-to-face. Obviously, we are one of the critical worker categories. Sure. And we have a statutory duty to maintain skills and competence and adequate training for all of our firefighters. So even though we've had to completely rejig the way we do training, and for example, our new recruits courses are now half the size that they used to be, and we're having to deliver it in slightly different ways to maintain the social distancing that's necessary, we've been focusing our efforts on that operational risk critical training. Other areas of training, we are now starting to work through how we can do those remotely. But obviously, as you'll appreciate, a lot of the risk critical training is now taking a lot longer because we're having to do it in much smaller groups. So staff capacity has been stretched to the limit on that.
Yeah, I sort of I understand the physical bit with the sort of work that they carry out, and a lot of that, I guess, has got to be practical and face to face and all of that. Has any virtual training gone on? Because I guess they would still need to be doing things like diversity and other less practical things, if you like. So has any virtual training gone on in the authority?
Yeah, we have had some training is done electronically through our training platform. So it might be an online course relevant to the service. So it might be on, very key specific things such as data protection or standard operating procedures, those types of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we know? I know we didn't get very far with the networking, but do we know if any of the of our colleagues in other areas have done any virtual training for members?
I'm not aware of any that have. No.
No.
But that's not to say they haven't.
No.
I can certainly check.
I mean, hopefully we're coming to the end of this sort of thing, but I guess there'd be, for at least I would have thought, at least the next 6 months, probably, maybe more, there will be more virtual and online type stuff. So if there is some training that we could usefully use, or that other people have been using that we could borrow, that might be helpful.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Just Chair, sorry, on that note there about borrowing other people's training, we'll come on to the Adjudication Panel for Wales, I think, as the next item. But I do see that on page 16 of our notes, which is section 1 of their report, they discuss training that they're doing on judgecraft, communication, freedom of expression. So it'd be interesting, I think, to see what topics they cover in their training, and B, whether that's something that we could potentially benefit from. I'm not sure how we would access that, but it'd be an interesting look at maybe getting into some training that way. Yeah,
sure. Thank you. That's a very helpful discussion. Thank you. Anything more on that, or can we move on? 90.6, we were talking about the monitoring officers, and officers agreed to provide clarification on that particular issue. Did we get an update on that?
Yeah, that's because it will depend on the nature of the allegation, because obviously it will impact one of our fire authority members, but the allegation that we would deal with would generally be in relation specifically to their role as a fire authority member, not as a member of their home authority. It was only if there was potentially some overlay that there might be some dual work.
Hello? I've lost you altogether.
I think you've still got us, so I think we've just lost Sally temporarily, Jeff.
Oh, okay. We lost Sally now. Not just me having problems then. Yes, I mean, that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? That it looks as though what we're saying is that we would confine ourselves to a complaint that directly applied to us. Is that people's understanding?
Yes.
Yeah, don't nod because I can't see you. But yes, anybody think differently to that? No. Okay, but we got some clarification anyway. Is Sally back with us?
No, Chair. Sally's exited.
Can you be Sally now then?
I will attempt my best to step into Sally's shoes until she can return.
I'm sure you'll do it extremely well. Thank you very much. Right, 90.7, we were talking again about the monitoring officer possibly closing off and resolving. And I remember the conversation, which was that we wanted to know whether a monitoring officer had closed maybe a minor issue and it decided to be closed off quite quickly. So we wanted to be informed of what the complaint was and how it had been resolved, and to see if any trends, and to ensure that the complaint had been investigated properly, which I think is entirely reasonable. So do we have an update on that from the officers?
Chair, just to let you know, Sally's managed to rejoin us now from what looks like her iPhone. So
okay.
Give her a minute to...
Okay.
Yeah. Apologies.
Sally, is Sally there?
Yes. Can you
Sally?
hear me?
We can hear you, Sally. We were on 90.7, where we were asking to be informed of complaints that the officer had closed them off and resolved them, probably fairly low-level complaints, but had been resolved at a low level. But we wanted to know what the complaint was, how it had been resolved, so we can identify any trends and satisfy ourselves that it had been investigated properly. And officers were going to tell us, but I don't know if you've even had any this year.
We have had none. Yes, so.
But you did note that in the event of a flood of them coming in the next 12 months, we would be notified. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. 90.8 is the last one on that page. We had a question and answer session. Oh, that's when we were asking about the date, but that's October again, isn't it? But we don't know the exact date. Yeah.
No.
Okay. So that's the minutes from the last meeting. Is anything anybody wants to raise from those minutes?
No, thank you.
No. Okay. So the next agenda item then is the Adjudication Panel report.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything to say about that. I mean, I guess we've all read it. Does anybody want to raise anything?
I mean, it's Simon, and just to say, I was fascinated to see how few complaints they deal with. I mean, the graph on page 18, if I'm reading it correctly, and I have to say I didn't think it was very clear because it seems to suggest that you can have 0.5 of a complaint on the left-hand axis, but I think it's suggesting that in 2019 to 2020 they just had 2 complaints, or they just dealt with 2 cases, which just seems extraordinary to me for a national tribunal. But obviously, it's great that they're not having to field a lot of complaints, and members are obviously behaving themselves, but which is good.
Are you on page 18, which at the bottom says page 8?
Oh yes, that's right.
That's okay. Well, funnily enough, although I said I didn't have any comment to make, I see I have made a little mark in my hard copy here, in that I wasn't sure I understood the number of references and the number of appeals. And I understand that some may overlap into previous years, but I couldn't really work it out. They didn't add up to me, but I'm sure they're right. Did anybody else? Perhaps you didn't look at them too closely like I did, but 1920, their appeals. Appeal. I couldn't really work out when some of the appeals were held, and you couldn't tell from that whether they overlapped into the next year or not.
No, I agree. I have to say I found the way the data was presented extremely confusing. But it's certainly, from what I can understand of it, they obviously deal with very, very few cases, which I just thought was really interesting.
Sure. And then the one on page 19, facing that, they've had no appeals since 2016-17. Have they? Or haven't dealt with any appeals?
Yeah.
For 3 years. And yet they have had several references, two in 1 year, one in those. So they've had 5 references in the last 3 years, but no appeals since 2016-17. I wouldn't dispute their figures, and they probably know exactly what they're doing. And as you say, they're not huge numbers anyway, but they are a bit confusing.
And of course, they've got such a limited remit anyway, so they will deal with the most serious of the ombudsman references, because otherwise it would be going back to the Home Authority Standards Committee for determination. And of course, it's then only appeals against sanctions of the Standards Committee, respective Standards Committees, that they would deal with. So, no, they do meet few and far between. And I think it's quite correct. Some of the cases, the year that they're referenced across to the APW doesn't always coincide with the year that they're finally determined.
No, quite. Okay. Anything more on that report?
I think there's just for members' information, really. I think.
Yeah, sure. It does make interesting reading, though.
Yes, and I think from my perspective, certainly a lot of the learning is from page 22, so that's 12 at the bottom. The case summaries
Yeah, they're useful. Yeah.
are probably the key learning points from those documents.
Okay. If there's nothing more on that agenda item, we move on to agenda item 6, which is going to be page 27 at the top. It hasn't got a number at the bottom. Good Lord. Well, I think they have it further on. So we're on to the adjudication, the adjudication panel for Wales practice direction on page 27. I don't think I made any notes on that. Did anybody have any comment to make on that?
No, I think for me it's probably worth noting that the tribunal now seem to be being more proactive in issuing guidance and direction. So you'll note that even though the APW has been in existence for quite some time, this is the first practice direction that they've actually issued, and they do fortunately seem to keep them fairly succinct and to the point, rather than a long laborious direction where you have to try and pick the weeds out of.
Okay. No further comment on that item 6?
No.
Okay, thank you. Item 7 then, which is page 31, and it's the Adjudication Panel for Wales Presidential Guidance.
Yes, so this, Sarah Watkins here speaking now.
Hi,
So this
Sarah.
guidance has been issued during 2020, and
Yeah.
there are 3 elements to the presidential guidance that's been issued. The first being anonymity, the second being the role of the monitoring officer, and the third around disclosure. Did members want me to go through a summary of that information, or is everybody happy with what they've read in the contents of the report?
I can't see the nods or the hands or anything. No?
Making silence.
Silence.
Stillness.
I mean, it's Simon. I don't need a summary, thank you. But I mean, just to observe, I thought it was quite interesting what the role of the monitoring officer can be when they do have hearings, and that I think, as I understand it, the monitoring officer can choose to appear and to assist the tribunal, and if they do that, they have a sort of a neutral role in the proceedings. I thought that was quite unusual, not something I've seen in other tribunals.
Yeah, funnily enough, I thought something similar, and I may have misread, in that, yes, he's supposed to be neutral, but in a way, I saw him as almost being like a clerk of the court. But also, wouldn't he be the prosecuting officer? Wouldn't he be the one who's brought the case in the first place?
No, not in these ones, because in those instances, it's generally references from the Public Service Ombudsman. So they are the ones that would then present the case.
But where would they have got it from?
It could be a direct complaint from another member of the public. It could come from any source.
But if it came, let's say, if it came from our authority, if that's the origin of it, then our monitoring officer would be the one taking it forward in the first instance. So he wouldn't be neutral, would he?
Not necessarily.
No, but possible.
No, possible, but then if the Home Monitoring Officer was dealing with it and it was going to the Standards Committee, then it would only go to the APW on appeal against sanction.
Right, but nevertheless, it would have originated with the monitoring officer, and therefore he couldn't be neutral.
They can be. It would only be if the monitoring officer had instigated the complaint and it was in relation to themselves that they couldn't be neutral.
That's an interesting approach. Okay, well, let's not get too bogged down in that, because we would presumably, or they would deal with it as if that situation arose. But there's the guidance anyway. Anybody else want to say anything about that? Okay, we're over the page on the agenda. Agenda item 8, the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales Draft Annual Report, page 47.
Page 47. Thank you, members. I'm going to cover this one for you as well.
Thank you.
To give Sally a bit of a break in proceedings. So this report brings to your attention relevant sections of the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales draft report relating to payments of members of Welsh Fire and Rescue authorities. And it's the responsibility of the Independent Remuneration Panel to determine and review the remuneration of members of local authorities, of which fire and rescue authorities are included. And the panel's issued its draft report, which you can see attached relevant extracts in Appendix 1. And this is to advise members that the Council's remuneration has been recommended to have an increase in 2021-22. So the basic salary for fire and authority members will increase to £2,026 per annum. Then the senior salary increasing to £5,765 per annum, which is inclusive of the basic salary. And then the chair of the fire authority salary to be £10,818 per annum, again inclusive of the basic salary. Members will also have noted by reading the report that the panel has reviewed the contributions towards the costs of care and personal assistance, which can be claimed by members, and that this has been significantly updated, and there is now a requirement for receipts for both formal and informal care. The panel have stated that the care costs cannot be paid to someone who is part of a member's household, and officers have sought further clarity on what is meant by this. Early indications being that it means someone that is living in the same house as the member. And the panel have indicated that they will consider this issue further once the consultation period is closed and provide further clarity. If I move you on to Appendix 1, which is attached, which is the draft annual report, the two relevant sections there are, if you turn over to page 51 of the pack and to page 2 of the report, are Section 8, Payment to Members of Welsh Fire and Rescue Authorities, and then Section 10, the contribution towards the costs of care of personal assistance. And if you turn to pages 58 to 60, you can see the determination on Fire and Rescue Authority members, and then page 63 is the contribution towards cost of care for personal assistance. So that's just to advise members of the content of the draft annual report. Any questions?
When was this published? Because it says the 1st of February, but that's only today. It hasn't come out today, is it?
No, I don't believe it's been published yet. It's due to be published in February 21. The draft came out in November, I believe. Is that correct,
Okay.
Sally?
It does. What they tend to do is in November they'll publish their draft of their report, which is all badged up with the February date.
Right.
They'll go out to consultation, get the feedback. It hasn't as yet been published as a final document.
Right.
Also not heard back from them as yet with the further clarification on the costs of care, because that was a specific issue that I'd queried with them, that we needed some quite clear guidance on as to whether family members were included in that or not.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else got any questions about that?
Yes, this is Mark. I just had a question, I guess, from my curiosity. On 8.5, which is page 59, it talks about strong training ethos and attendance at formal meetings. I was curious to know, is there any requirement for the members to undergo initial training before they're allowed to sit in any meetings? So do they have to complete that in advance of sitting? And then also, if members are not attending training, is that viewed in the same light as if they're not attending the actual meetings?
Okay, so picking up on the training, we do have induction training that we provide for all members of the Fire Authority. There's no provision that enables us to make that mandatory, so that a member can't take up their seat until they've received such training. We do try and make that training quite bespoke to the Fire Authority. Obviously, within local authorities, members have to undergo mandatory code of conduct training. If they sit on planning committee, that's another mandatory training session that they have to attend. So we try and make sure that we're not duplicating any training that they've already had to have as mandatory within their home authority. So, for example, the code of conduct, we tailor it more to the additional considerations that they will have to take into account by being a member of the Fire Authority, and certainly that twin-hatted approach. We do also do an annual report into the Fire Authority on member attendance, which includes all of the relevant meetings and training sessions that we put on throughout the year, so that there is that transparency about member attendance at these meetings and events. Does that cover your queries, Dr. Kirby?
Yes, yeah, that's fine, thank you, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any queries on that one?
I think Ronnie's raising his hand.
Right.
If I may just come in on two. If I may just come in on 2 points, thank you, Chair. I was interested to see that under the membership of this Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, there are 2 new members, one of whom is named as Claire Sharp. And I wondered if that was the same Claire Sharp. I was actually involved in the Adjudication Panel for Wales, or a different one, because if it's the same, I think that's an interesting crossover of activity. I'm not suggesting there's anything improper about it. Let me be quite clear. I'm just suggesting it's an interesting crossover of activity. The other issue that I wanted to raise really is in relation to Sally's point about informal care arrangements. And again, this is not directly relevant in terms of an answer to your question, but what I wanted to say was that the Independent Remuneration Board of the Welsh Parliament has determined in relation to this issue that such costs cannot be claimed unless they are part of a formal arrangement and if there are invoices to support it. So it cannot be provided by a family member or by anyone through an informal caring arrangement if there is to be some recuperation of costs. So I add that to your consideration only to be helpful. Thank you.
No, that is helpful. Certainly on the membership of the Remuneration Panel and Adjudication Panel, I couldn't tell you if it's the same Claire Sharp, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. It would be a bit of a coincidence. Yeah. There would be 2 individuals so named. And certainly, yes, that is useful on the Welsh Parliament stance, because I know when I've previously sought clarification from this, obviously if it's a member of the household who doesn't live with the person with the caring needs, it appears that the Remuneration Panel would accept this rather than provided under a formal care package. But that's where they're obviously looking to discuss this further during the consultation period, and they've promised to come back to me on that.
Yes, I mean, interesting you say about the Claire Sharp and moving from one part of the organisation to another. I did notice at least once, I can find one, I thought I saw somewhere else too, that if you go back to page 16, which is the Adjudication Panel, and there's a little diagram, and then it says appointments. If you can find that, it's page 16. During this period, we have appointed one new lay member cross-ticketed from another tribunal. Now, I don't know what the rules and regulations are, but I would have thought that if they had a vacancy, it should be filled in an open competition. Rather than saying, oh, well, he's good on that tribunal, let's appoint him on our tribunal. Have I got that wrong?
Yeah, I'm not. To be honest, I'm not sure how the appointments process with the adjudication panel works.
No, I'm not. But cross-ticketed from another tribunal suggests that that appointment wasn't a sort of open competition.
Mm.
And I think I saw that expression cross-ticketed somewhere else too, but I can't find it.
Okay, I'll try and make some inquiries and come
Well,
back.
yeah, be discreet. I don't want to set a particular hair running if it's all above board and that's how it works.
No, that's fine. I can say that it's members inquiring to try and understand how the system works.
Yeah, something vague like that. Thank you very much. But I did see, if somebody else finds it, or if you find it somewhere else in there, I'm sure it's mentioned more than once, this idea that somebody was taken from one panel to another. Okay, anything else on that? Was remuneration, wasn't it? So we're on agenda 9, yeah?
Yes.
Page 87.
I think Sarah's going to pick this one up. We thought we'd save you listening to my voice the entire afternoon, and then I'll pick the last couple up.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
And thank you, Chair. Bless you. It sounds like you're listening to me all afternoon at the moment, so I'm glad there's a few agenda items on.
That's speaking on behalf of the committee, that isn't a burden. Thank you very much.
So kind of you. So moving on swiftly to the PSOW annual report and accounts. So this annual report addresses matters relating to the dual functions of the Public Serviceman Ombudsman for Wales, and their dual function being to consider complaints about public service providers in Wales and also in relation to members who have breached their authority's Members' Code of Conduct. The annual report details the performance of the Ombudsman Office for the year and provides an update on developments and delivers any key messages arising from their work. Moving on to some of the stats within there. The number of Code of Conduct complaints has dropped sharply this year, with a reduction of 18% on to 18-19 figures, which appears to be primarily due to the reduction in county council complaints. And the number of Code of Conduct complaints for the year 2019-20 was 231. Now, of these complaints, looking at page 105 in our pack, the highest number, again, related to the promotion of equality and respect, which is 49%. It is actually a reduction on the previous year where it was 51%. The next highest roller is 17% related to the failure to disclose or register interests, which remained the same to the previous year, and 11% to the accountability and openness, which is actually increased this year, and then 10% related to the integrity, which is down from the previous year, and 7% the duty to uphold the law, which was 9%. Now, of those complaints, 33 were investigated, and one case was referred to the adjudication panel. There's some information about that on page 108 of the document. So, in general terms, it largely mirrors the position of the previous year, with complaints weighted towards equality of respect, followed by failure to register or declare interests. And the most common outcome is to close after initial consideration, and 202 were closed under that outcome. outcome. More importantly for us as a fire authority, it's pleasing to note that no complaints were received in 2019-20 in relation to the public service provision by South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority, and more importantly for this committee, none with respect to code of conduct complaints with our members, which again has been the position as per previous years. So if members have got any questions about that report or any comments about the report?
That was wonderfully explained. Thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? No? Okay, we're nearly there. So we're now on to the, well, we sort of covered it really, as the casebook, item 10. We've wandered into that, the Code of Conduct casebook, 123, and that makes interesting reading. Does anybody have any comment about that? We've heard some of it already, but any questions, any queries, any comments?
For members' information on this, obviously the Ombudsman generally issue their casebooks quarterly. I suspect everything's been somewhat delayed because of COVID, because you'll notice that this is the casebook for October to December 2019 that wasn't published at the time of your last meeting. I checked again on the Ombudsman website last night, and there's still no casebooks for 2020. So I suspect that's something that they're trying to catch up with over the next few months. But I will chase them to find out if there's been, or there are due to be, any more published in the near future for 2020.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then we're at agenda item 11, page 129, which is about the conference this year, 2020. Sally, anything there? It's fairly straightforward.
I haven't got a date for that as yet, but it will be October. It is going to be held virtually, which will be quite a different way of doing it, but hopefully will mean that actually we can accommodate more people. I'm not quite sure how the breakout rooms are going to work, but I'm sure it's not insurmountable. Obviously, we'd take your earlier comments about the social media guidance training and equality and diversity, and see if we can feed some of those back through, particularly relevant as obviously from the Ombudsman's annual report. The majority of the cases still fall into the category of equality and respect. So that's quite a good one, I think, to take forward there. But we'll provide more details as soon as we know anything further.
I'm just wondering if they've made a decision to hold it virtually a little bit early. I mean, none of us know what's going to happen with lockdown and things that are going on, although the general view seems to be that by the summer we might be out of this, and October is sometime after that. But they've already taken the decision. That's fair enough. But what I was going to suggest is that one or two of the organisations that I'm involved in, they like virtual, they like Zoom, because it means that people don't have to travel, or it makes life a little bit easier for some, and more people attend generally, and it certainly has advantages, but it ain't perfect, is it? Because you lose the face-to-face and the informal chat and stuff. And what one or two people are suggesting is that you have a hybrid. So if it were going to be, I don't know, in Brecon, for example, those that wanted to attend in Brecon, face-to-face could, but there would be also the facility for those to join by Zoom, and it becomes a hybrid. I don't know whether that was ever considered as an option, but it seems to be quite constructive to me, particularly as we're talking about, 9 months away.
Certainly, I can raise those issues and see if we can get some sort of hybrid option.
You can tell from my involvement in this meeting that I'm an IT expert. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether you want to just ask that informally as to was that considered, or would it be a good idea, or they turn around and say, no, it's going to be virtual, decision taken. That's it.
Yeah.
May I just chip in for a moment, please, Chair?
Please do.
And say that I've been to one such conference before, and that was held in Aberystwyth. Other members of the committee may have attended in other locations, but I think getting to Aberystwyth from South Wales is somewhat of a challenge if one is doing the journey backwards and forwards, and indeed the conference itself on one day.
Sure.
I actually very much agree with your comments in relation to the possible benefits of a hybrid arrangement, but perhaps some thought could be given to the actual location of the physical conference itself. And my second point would be that it would be good to have early notification of the date as soon as possible in order to try and get it into diaries, insofar as that might be possible. My third comment, and I'm going to stop in a moment, is that my understanding is that the Ombudsman would normally have come to the end of his contract by now, but that has been extended because of COVID. So it seems very likely that at some point, perhaps later this year or early next year, a new public service ombudsman will be appointed. So there might be opportunities in all of that for doing things slightly differently. And again, I offer no criticism of the present incumbent. I'm just suggesting that there may be opportunities to do things in a way that's slightly different for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That's interesting. I didn't know about the ombudsman. So yes, I mean, new brooms and sweeping clean and all that. He or she might come in with different ideas on how to take things forward. Okay, well, that pretty well brings us to the end of the agenda. Before I forget, and before I offer any other business to the committee, I don't recall. And looking at the minutes from last year, I don't recall us actually formally making a note that we haven't had any complaints to deal with during the year. And I think somewhere in our minutes, as it's one of our main roles in life, I think somewhere in our minutes we ought to sort of note that we haven't had any complaints to deal with in the previous 12 months. I can't see it in the previous minutes for the last year, so perhaps we should have done it then as well.
That's fine. We can
It's only a one-liner or a two-liner, you know.
Yes.
Okay, that was my little bit. Any other business from anybody who would like to ask a question, make a comment?
Yeah, Councillor. Oh, sorry, I keep saying Councillor. Ronnie Alexander and Simon Barnes.
Okay,
Simon,
Mr.
do you want to go first?
Go alphabetical order.
You go first, Ronnie. That's fine. Carry on.
Okay. I just want to, with your forbearance, I just want to return to the training issue and say that, I continue to be seized about that, and I'm not going to forget it. And actually, to me, it seems to be an important thing to do. I wouldn't like, and basically what I'm saying, Sally, is I think we need a plan, and I wouldn't like to come back to this meeting in a year's time and for us not to have made some sort of progress along the way. And I hope those comments meet with your agreement, Chairman. Thank you. I'll stop now.
Well, yes, I think that's helpful again. And what we could do, and I take your point about we don't want to be here in 12 months' time saying the same thing. So Sally, could we set you a date and say that by where are we now? We're February, aren't we? February, March, April. By the end of April, you could circulate us an update on where you think we could be doing some training, either virtually or practically.
That's fine. Yeah.
Is that all right, Mr. Alexander?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you. As I say, I'm sorry to keep banging this drum.
No. That's the purpose of the meeting.
I'm very seized of the necessity of it. Thank you.
Yeah, that came across loud and strong. Okay, who's next? Sorry,
Simon Barnes.
Mr.
Yeah,
Barnes.
thank you. Yeah, just wanted to, yeah, from a personal point of view, to endorse the virtual format of the meeting. I mean, I have a certain amount of self-interest because I live quite far away from the HQ, but I think these types of meetings work really well when they're held virtually, and obviously it does cut out a lot of travelling. So I know I've asked previously, and before COVID it legally wasn't an option because obviously it is a statutory public meeting, but just be a personal vote from me that if it is an option when all this is behind us, then I personally think it works very well.
Well, as I say, I don't see why in the future this meeting couldn't be hybrid as well. So if we were to meet, let's say, in Lantrisant, and people wanted to go to Lantrisant, that would also mean that the public could have access, I guess. They never want to come, but they would have the opportunity to come. But if people like you wanted to come through on Zoom or some other platform, this could be a hybrid meeting, as I suggested earlier on. Maybe.
Yeah, certainly up until now, the legislation hasn't been in place to allow virtual meetings. Emergency legislation was passed fairly shortly after the outbreak of the COVID pandemic to permit virtual meetings and permit public bodies not allowing public access to their sites. New proposed legislation is due to come in force because the current arrangements expire in May. So we've just got to work through what those new arrangements might be under revised legislation that's coming through post.
But the beauty of the hybrid meeting is that it wouldn't need legislation because it would the meeting that would be held in Lantrisant would be open to the public. It would only be one or two members who are joining remotely. That can't be illegal.
Up until now, the members had to be present at the meeting, which is what the emergency legislation had to be passed. We weren't able to have the hybrid meetings. The legislation that was permitting that for trials was with the local authorities, not with fire and rescue authorities. So no, we haven't been able to do these previously. So we're keen, obviously, to try and work through the proposals in the new legislation.
Yeah. I understand that. But if next year we were having what we would consider to be a normal meeting, but one member joined remotely, I don't see a problem with that, and I haven't seen in writing that people must attend in public. We would be in person. We would be allowing the public to attend, and therefore we would be complying with the legislation.
Certainly within the local government legislation, it does say that the members have to be in physical attendance at the meeting.
Oh, okay.
There's been a lot of work with Welsh Government trying to work through what the implications are of virtual meetings. So, for example, if your connection drops out and you're not party to the whole debate on an item, are you able to vote? If you can't see all the members at any point in time,
right. Okay.
And there's a confidential item being discussed, is that permissible? So that there's been an awful lot of issues to work through to get to the point of remote meetings.
Okay. Would it be possible, I mean, I don't know, without sort of having access to loads and loads of minutes of meetings where that's been discussed, is there a sort of couple of pages of documentation which would summarise where we are with those meetings or not?
Probably not a succinct form at the moment. No, it's possibly, if I could suggest, it's probably better to focus on the proposed mechanisms that are likely to be in place post-May.
Right.
Which obviously we're trying to work through at the moment because there's provisions on having to have live streaming and things of some of the meetings that take place.
Okay, well, if it's still being spoken about, let's wait for the outcome then. But as you can tell, I'm quite keen on the hybrid model. But if it's illegal, then we have to live with that too. Any other questions or comments? Any other business?
No one's in. No.
Well, thank you all very, very much for your attendance. I'm sorry for my technical difficulties. Hopefully next year we won't have to do it in this format. We can all meet up in Lantrisant and renew our sort of acquaintances there. So thank you for bearing with me. It's not easy chairing a meeting when you can't see anybody, but I think we got through it quite well. So thank you all very much. And thank you to the officers too.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.